Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Matt, how are we looking for volume there? We good?
Good.
Excellent, thank you, sir. So at noon today, I'll need to know whether or not you're planning on taking the test. Because the way that this works is, if you're planning on taking the test, I already sent those forms in that you guys filled out yesterday. You have your form here? You didn't give it to me yesterday?
No.
I needed it by the end of yesterday. Are you testing tomorrow?
No.
Oh, okay. I still need to send it in though, so I'll have that information. So what's going to happen tomorrow or tonight after class is over, once I find out that you're taking the test tomorrow, I'm going to go ahead and let them know who's taking the test. They're going to go ahead and get you registered for the test. I have a machine that's in that big black case back there that is our testing machine. That's going to go back to my hotel room with me. The folks down at Will over at Phoenix TS is going to connect into my machine. He's going to go ahead and push the exam out for those people taking it. In the morning, I'll bring that machine in here. Up on your desktop, you have an icon that talks about the testing software. We're just going to go ahead and click on that. It'll go ahead and connect you to that machine. Your name will pop up along with everybody else who's taken the test. We'll click on that. We'll go ahead and start your exam. So you'll sit there and for the next 90 minutes get a lot of questions you might have seen already. So once you get done, it will ask you for a survey. At the end of the survey, you will see the word congratulations across the bottom, and it will tell you what your score is. I'm hoping it says that you have 900 out of 900, because that means that you'll be joining me for dinner sometime soon. What's that? 7. See, it's out of 900. It's 80%, so I believe it's 720 is the minimum score for passing. So it's out of 900, so it's 70%. So 720 out of 900. You'll get your results right then and there. We have no way of printing it, so you are welcome to bring your camera in or your phone into the test tomorrow. You can't have access to it while you are testing, but at the end of the test, you can come back over. Everything has to be off your desk and on the side of the room. You can come back over, grab your camera, take a picture of it. Okay? So tomorrow morning, we'll do a review between 8:30 and 9:30. Hopefully we'll start testing right around 9:45 to 10 o'clock. Okay? How many are planning on testing?
Maybe.
Excellent.
Probably not. Just going to be honest.
No worries, you got to do it within 2 weeks. But I do need your laptops back. I can't, unfortunately, let you keep the laptops.
Go down to Phoenix and turn it in.
I'm sorry?
I'll just go down to Phoenix and turn it in.
No. I am personally responsible for making sure those laptops get back.
I'll video chat you so you can see me like handing it to them now.
Right.
They have to go back on Friday, unfortunately.
2 weeks Friday, got it. We got time.
Yeah, I didn't say which Friday now, did I? Okay, so this next chapter that we have is for access control. So we're going to take a look at some of the access control principles. We're also going to talk about some account management, things that we can do. In this first module, we're going to take a look at how to compare and contrast the access control model. We've talked about some of these models already, so we're looking back and just basically reviewing them again. We're also going to talk a little bit more about access control lists, and then we'll talk about some of the NTFS permissions and the inheritance that we have if you're going to move files from one location to another. So as we start looking at the different types of access control, we talked about this yesterday when we took a look at the different ways that we evaluate our computer systems for levels of security. So we talked about DAC, MAC. So DAC, again, is discretionary access control. So with discretionary access control, I, as the end user, have discretion as to who I share my files and folders with. So generally what I'm going to do is just create a directory. I'm going to name it a shared file or something, and I'm going to provide a username and password to get into that directory, and I'm going to email it to you. You would then have access into this. So that's your discretionary access control. Mandatory access control, the first thing that you should think of anytime you think of mandatory access control or MAC is going to be the word labels. When we think about labels, we talked yesterday about the fact that everybody has a classification and all of our data has a label associated with it. So your data is classified, individuals get a clearance level. So as long as my clearance level matches that level of the classification, so if I've got a secret clearance and the data's got a level of classification of secret, then I have access to actually see that as long as I have that need to know. So when we take a look at mandatory access control, labels are the thing that really stick out to us as far as what makes that different than discretionary access control. So again, we are subjects, we have a clearance level, the data's got a classification level. As long as we match that, we are above it, we have access to that. Now, what I find very frustrating from CompTIA is that you will notice that the next two are RBAC. We have role-based access control and rule-based access control. So I'm going to start with role-based because that was the first one that came out. Role-based access control. We are granting you access because of the role that you have in the company. When I teach out in Guam, my role is that of a contractor. So I am contractor 2. When Alicia sets me up in the classroom, I come in as contractor 2. I keep the same password. And I come in, I have access then to the files and folders I need for the class that I'm teaching during the day. If I'm coming back at night, I have to log out, log back in, and I get access to that in the evening because not only is she granting me access at that moment in time, but also gives me access to the files between a certain time, 8 in the morning and 5 in the evening. For my evening class, it's from 5:30 until 10 p.m. So when we look at role-based, we are looking at generally short-term employees that are coming in and you're just granting them access for a little bit of time. The rule-based access control is looking at the rules defined for the routers and the firewalls. So this is going to be things such as your access control list. Those are the rules. So who has access, what IP addresses have access. So again, we're looking at source and destination addresses, the ports and protocols. We can even extend that out and say you can come in from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We can be very defining about those rules that we put on the routers and the firewalls. So this would be some of the things that we're looking at. Your attribute-based access control is the other one. Administrators will define the attributes for the resources, the users, the environment. So an attribute access control might be something along the lines of we're going to give this group access to these particular resources, these files and folders from noon until 1 because that's when your committee meeting is and it will grant you access to this. So that would be attribute-based. We can do it for the environment as well, defining something such as rules that we're going to put into our server room to say if my temperature drops below this or if it goes above this, please contact the following person. So that could be used in attribute-based as well. We also think about the default permissions. Implicit deny is that one thing that we're always looking at. So we're going to say permit this, permit this, permit this, and again, everything else is going to be not allowed. We talked a little bit about the discretionary access control in the Linux environment, and this is what I had showed you up on the whiteboard a little earlier. I mentioned to you if there's a D over here on the left-hand side, as we see up here on top, this is a directory. So here's my directory. So what they're going to ask you here is something along the lines of what are the group permissions? So right here, what are my group permissions? Read, that's all it is. So when we take a look at this first dash right here is for directory. The first 3, read, write, execute, if there was an execute there, would be for the owner. So this is the owner's group. This is the group, and then this is for the other users over here. So when they ask you about waffle sales or sales text, they're going to ask you what is the group permissions. You would say the group is going to be this right here. So it just shows me the read. So that's all you get. That's basically how they're going to show that to you. And you will get one of those on the test, more than likely. When we take a look at NTFS, which is the NT file system, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. We think about who has access to our system. It could be the owner, it could be different groups that we decide. So the principals, these are the individuals who have access into that file or folder. It could be the owner, or it could be groups that we have assigned to this. We have something called the SID, which is my security identifier. This is going to identify who the principal of the group is. Your SID is stored on your computer, and again, this is an area that you might want to consider securing. In the ethical hacking class, we're looking for your SID. We're actually looking for the SID of the administrator. The administrator is going to be given a SID number of 500. This is a default of Microsoft. So when we find the administrator, generally it would say administrator : 500. Well, what if we went and changed the name of the administrator, which is something that you should do right off the bat. So we changed the name of the administrator from administrator to Eric. Even if you went into the SID, you would see Eric : 500, which means I am the administrator. So it's very easy for me to use some of the tools that I have in ethical hacking to go into your Windows machine, look for that SID that's got the 500 at the end, and whoever's out in front of that is the administrator. That's the person whose account we want to get into. So if I'm going to elevate my privileges, that's the individual whose account I want access to. Now, within our NTFS, we have what are known as ACEs, which is an access control entry. We talked about access control lists. We talked about the fact that we have got lines of code in there. So when you're coming down, you hit the first line of code. Excuse me, they're ordered. They're in a specific order for a reason. So we start going through each one of these entries. These are known as ACEs, or access control entries. So this would give us access into a file. So these are the permissions for a SID. So these are access control. You have access to this, you have access to this, you have access to this. So it's very similar to an access control list. We also have a dynamic access control list. Dynamic access control lists are a little bit different than regular access control lists. Dynamic is going to contain all the ACEs that apply to one principal, but they are initiated on the fly. So the moment that you come in and say, I'm going to log in, that's when those are put into place. All of a sudden, you're here. We're going to go ahead and put those access control list entries in place. So the dynamic access control says we're not putting an access list in place for everybody right here, right now, making every single packet go through that access list. It's going to utilize a lot of resources doing that. So what we do is we simply say, when you log in, that access list for access of where you can go and what you can do is immediately put into place, and we hit those controls just that quick. So that way we aren't leaving that. When you log out, guess what happens to that DACL? It gets pulled out. So that dynamic access list, the moment that you log out, that gets removed from memory. So that way we are keeping as much memory alive in our system as possible. We don't want to utilize a lot of our memory with an access control list. So a dynamic access list works really well for us. Gosh, if I had somebody in the military, then we could talk about that. Oh, wait a minute, you guys are in the military. So this is one of the mechanisms that was utilized. Actually, this very first mechanism that's been utilized to control access into data for the military. This is known as the Bell-LaPadula model. Some people call it Bell-LaPadula. When we take a look at the way that this is set up, it's the first mathematical model that was ever created for an entity, and it was created for the military. It looks at one thing and one thing only. It looks at confidentiality. If you ever came in and took my CISSP class or you continue on in security, you're going to find that there are other models, but all the other models are looking at the integrity of the data. This is the only model that looks at the confidentiality side of this. So when we start thinking about Bell LaPadula, again, there's two things that we look at with any sort of access. We look at subjects. We are subjects. We are accessing objects. And again, we are looking at the fact that our subjects are given a clearance level. We are looking at the fact that our data is being given a classification level. So again, we have labels. Our data has labels. As long as we are equal to or greater than that, we can read that information. We have two things we look at, reading and writing. So over on the left-hand side of the screen, what you're going to see is my reading capabilities. So this is all the read side of things. So here it says my end users coming in with a secret clearance, they have the ability to read anything at their level and anything below. Is that correct? Yes. Here's the problem that we run into. Can I read document 1, which refers to document 2, which refers also to document 3, and then document 3 refers to document 4. Can I then bring these 4 documents together, and by aggregating these and correlating some information out of these, could I be bringing these documents together and look at this and say, this is no longer secret, this actually has the level of top secret? Yes, you can. You can bring things together at the top secret level, or the secret level, which combined would make this a top secret document. So what would I do with this document? Could I take it and write it up to the top secret level? Over on the right-hand side, what's it say under writing? What am I allowed to write to? Secret or? For writing, secret and top secret. I can't write below. What's going to happen to the confidentiality if I take something at the secret level and push it down to confidential? Then it's no longer secret. But I can correlate these documents together and I can go, hey, wait a minute, this is not right. These should all be pushed up. Somebody who's up there at that level is going to have to look at it and go, yes, that's acceptable to leave this here, or no, I'm sorry, I'm going to just have to push those back on down to secret. But that's one of the things I can do. And here's how I remember Bell LaPadula. I have the ability to read things at my level, correlate them at my level, and push them up to the top level, to top secret. I can write to top secret, but what I just wrote to top secret, I can't read what I just wrote. And to me, that's a little befuddling because you look at it and go, I have the right to, I can write this up there. But once I've written it up there, I can't read what I just wrote. That just doesn't make sense. But that's exactly what it is. I don't have the rights to read up at that level, but I can take something and push it up there if I feel that it's been placed in the wrong location, especially if I bring things together. So this is really what Bell LaPadula is about, is that I can read at my level and read everything below this. I can write to things at my level or write to things above. Because if I take something and write it below, then I'm lessening the level of security, and I don't have the clearance to do that. So that would be the things that we look at with Bell LaPadula. Or Bell LaPadula, depending on how you want to pronounce that. When we take a look at role-based access control, there's going to be elements of both MAC and DAC in here. So again, when we are the administrator and we're providing you with a role, part of what we're looking at is that we're saying that we can attach you to certain groups, we can give you certain permissions that are assigned centrally, and then we can give you some additive benefits as well, saying that you are part of this group and this group, so these will add together and give you a little bit more information. So again, if I'm coming in as a role-based, this is going to be for something that is going to be for a certain amount of time. Usually it's going to be a very short-term type of environment that I'm going to be in. When I'm teaching in Guam, I'm there for 1 week or 2 weeks. So when they're granting me access, they know it's only going to be for the short time, the short term. Very easy for them to grant me access to certain files and folders, but they put a time limit on it from this date to this date and from this time in the morning to this time in the afternoon. So it's pretty easy to control exactly what you want someone to see. With my rules, we have rules that are set by the administrator, so things such as my network access control list. So if I've got something like a router or a firewall, this is where I'm going to be putting my access control list. We can also whitelist and blacklist certain softwares that we are granting you access to to see or to utilize. So this would be where we're whitelisting and blacklisting things. Again, the rules I can put into place would either be static or dynamic. When we think about a static rule for something like a firewall, or better yet, a router. So if I put an access control list on the outside interface of the router, every single packet that reaches that access list, we have to go through it. We have to go through line by line. Does it match? No. Does it match? No. Does it match? No. No, 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 no. Yes, it does. Okay, we'll let it through. What's it say? Permit or deny. So we take a look at it, and every packet that comes through has to go through that whole thing. If you think about having 135,000 lines for your access list, that's a long list to go through. So one of the things that Cisco looked at was, how's the phone company do this? When you think about the phone company, let's take the city of Chicago. How many people live in Chicago? Or the surrounding area? A lot? What's a lot? Really big number. What'd you say, 10 million? Okay. It's a lot of people. How many phone numbers are added or deleted in the Chicago area on a daily basis? I would imagine tens of thousands if you've got 10 million people living there. Does the phone company update their database every day, at the end of every day? Why not? For them to update that entire database of 10 million records would take about a month and a half, given a very fast computer system. So they don't want to go back in and re-index the whole thing. So what do? They build something called an index file. So they have their database here with all the names in it, and they keep adding to the bottom of this. So all of a sudden, Ansel Adams comes in at the bottom. What do? They simply go, oh, here's our index over here that is in alphabetical order. Ansel Adams' name is way up here, but it's going to point way down to the bottom. They have this index file that points, so it uses pointers to point to the data to figure out where it is. Cisco looked at this and said, that's brilliant. Why don't we do that with our routers? With our routers, what we're looking at is destination address. If traffic's coming into my network, I care about the destination address. So I look at the destination address. We take the most exclusive address, which has a /32. So we start off at the top of our index, and here's all my /32s. Here's all my /27s. Here's all my /24s, my /16s, and finally at the bottom, /8. So when you say, I want to go to this address, I go, okay, well, what's the subnet mask? Oh, it's a /24. Let's come over to /24. So let's take a look at the address. It's a 192. There's the 192s, 168, 22.15. What's the line? That line of code's right over here. What's it say? Oh, we're supposed to delete, we're supposed to drop that traffic. Boom, drop the traffic. So it's using the index to figure out where the line of code is so it doesn't have to read through every single line of code. This is how they have made it much faster. So they did the same thing when they brought in the firewalls. When the new firewall software came out between version 6 and version 7, in order to invoke that index, you have to actually turn on turbo. Does anybody remember the old turbo buttons that we used to have on the 286s and 386 computers? Did it make it go faster, or did it seem like it was going faster?
The one I had an 8088, and I think it doubled it from
It really made it go faster.
6 to 12 megahertz.
So my buddy Chris Hosmer, who works up in Vermont, calls me up and he says, hey, I'm up here at the state capitol. We just implemented the new operating system for the version 7 of the firewall. And he goes, man, this firewall's running dog slow. I have no idea what dog slow is. But he's like, it runs dog slow. I'm like, I'm sorry to hear that, man. He goes, I said, how many lines to the access list? He said, oh, about 95. I said, Cisco's recommendation is that if it's got more than 12 lines of code for your access list, to go ahead and hit the turbo button. And he's like, I don't see a button. I said, no, the command is access list turbo. And he went, what? I said, try it. So he typed it in, and he goes, oh my God, now it's going really fast. So this adds that index capability. Automatically it does it now with our routers and our firewalls, but back in the day when they first played with it, you had to invoke that. So when you start thinking about the access list and you think about how big this static access list is, wouldn't it be better just to create the access list when you need it? So what they decided to do on the routers is they've given it the same capabilities that we have in a firewall. When you think about the basic rules of the firewall, if I'm on the inside of my network in the firewall or on the inside interface, can I send traffic to the outside interface? Yes, because the inside has a security level of 100, the outside has a security level of 0. So I can always go from a higher number to a lower number. I can send my traffic out. It stores this in its table and says if it matches this, allow it back in. Well, rather than writing an access list that's allowing traffic in to my router, could I use the same rules that say if I'm on the inside and I want to go to the outside and I only want to go someplace specific, could I then simply write an access list on the outside that's only going to allow my traffic back in? Once I've got my traffic and I'm done and I close that out, then I remove my access list. That's known as a dynamic access list. It's writing it on the fly, invoking it on the fly, utilizing my memory on the fly. When we're done, it returns that memory to the pool of unused memory and says, anybody else want to go out to the internet? Because we can write that access list right now for you if you want to. That's where the dynamic access list comes in, and it becomes really nice for us because we don't have to go through each and every line of code on the outside to figure out where the traffic is going to. As we begin thinking about Windows, the NTFS environment, we take a look at the permissions that we have. So if I am in an NTFS volume, my C drive, if I want to move files from one location to another, the permissions remain the same. So if I've got full control, those permissions that move across are going to be identical. So you maintain your permissions if you are moving this within the same drive itself. If I move it from the C drive to the D drive, whatever permissions the destination folder has on it, it will implement those. So if by chance the destination folder has read-only, even though I've got full control over here, as I move it to the D drive, we end up with read-only because that's what we would have in the destination folder. If we move it, and that's if we move it to another NTFS volume. If I move it outside of NTFS to a FAT volume, FAT's going to remove all the permissions. So whatever permissions you had in the NTFS volume, as you move it to the older technology, it loses all of those permissions that we have. We can also tell a system we don't want you to inherit those permissions. So right here on the right-hand side, it says include inheritable permissions from this object's parent. I could go ahead and remove that, which says that as this moves down from the parent to the child, from the directory to the folder, it's going to lose those permissions that we have. So this would be one of the ways that we can do this. We can also propagate the permissions. We can tell to apply these permissions to objects and or containers within this container only. So if I've got full control within the container, I can say everything in this I'm going to have full control over. So these are some of the things in Windows that you can play with to actually give yourself more permissions inside of that directory. Okay, we got a couple questions here. First one, secure access control models are based on which assumption? Implicit deny, yes. What access control model was popularized by military usage? Mandatory access control, yes. Using Bell LaPadula. or Bella Padula. Depends on how you want to pronounce it. What access control model is used by network hardware such as routers? Rule-based, yes. Wouldn't it be nice if all the questions on the test were this easy?
Are you going to be in there telling us?
What's that?
Are you going to be in there telling us the answers too?
Yes. I can already tell you what the answers are right now. A, B, C, or D. There's only 4 answers, so yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to tell you what the answers are, so I'm going to have to go relinquish my Security Plus certification. They actually dropped the answer already into this one. What identifies a security principal in an NTFS file system? It's my security identifier, so my SID is defining the security principal in there. What group permissions would a Linux file have if its permissions were displayed as dash, RWX, RW dash, R dash dash? What is it? Read and write. So when we take a look at this question, the first dash is directory. The first RWX is for user. The next RW dash is for the group, and the last R dash dash is for others. They're asking what group permissions. You see how they buried that in the question? I got it wrong the first time I read it too. So they're asking group permissions. They're asking for that middle group because that's group. Remember, user, group, others.
Maybe they should put U, G, and O above each of the.
Richard, would you like us to call Bill Gates right now and tell him to change things for us? Unfortunately, this is Linux. This is not a Windows thing. That's how they do it. So the way to do it would be just to sit there. You could just take it. You're going to get a piece of paper to write on, so you could actually write on this piece of paper, and you can just write it on out. So block out the D at the first, count out 3, 1, 2, 3, block it, 1, 2, 3, block it, and then say user, group, others. It's asking the group policies. That block in the middle. Yes, sir. Owner, yeah. Owner, group, others. So yeah, owner, user, same thing for me. So they're asking group, which is going to be that middle section. So that first RWX is the owner or the user. And then the RW dash is what we're looking for group. So read, write would be the answer for that. So group permissions are in the middle, so RW dash is read, write. If you want to implement an access control model that lets you easily assign users to a combination of multiple roles, also restrict access to some actions based on the time of day and physical location of the user, which model is the best fit? Actually, the attribute, because we're looking at attributes of several different things: time of day, physical location, and user access. So those are the different attributes that we're looking at. This next module talks about account management. We're going to talk about Active Directory and the user management. What types of accounts do we have? How to create the groups and other objects. We're going to talk about some group policy objects and how to enforce account policies in Windows. So we have several different account types in Windows environment. We've got the user. We've got privileged accounts. We've got shared accounts that we can have. We've got the guest account. That's always the first thing that we want to disable is the guest account. And we have certain services to take a look at. So as we start looking at some of the Active Directory objects that we have the user. So as we start looking at the user themselves, several different things we can put in there. How do we contact you? What's your extension number? What building are you in? What computer are you on? What is your default printer that we have? Have we given you a shared folder? What groups have we assigned you to? So we're going to go ahead and put some groups into Active Directory and say you have access to these particular groups or you are a part of these groups. And we assign you to an organizational unit. That organizational unit might be that you're part of the IT department. So this would be the way that we define the objects that we have within Active Directory. So as we start taking a look at the Active Directory objects, we're going to go ahead and we're creating here the new object of the user. So again, the first name, their initials, their last name. How do we want you logging on? So in this case, it's going to be student01. We're giving a local domain that we want to put you on, and what is the the login name for this user in Windows 2000. So this is we're pointing to the directory that we want you in and the name that we're going to use for you. So we can go ahead and create these for the users and for all the other types of objects that we have as well. We start thinking about the different group scopes that we have. We have the domain local. This is you can see this in your own domain. It can contain most objects. As we take a look at the group scope, we have different objects that can be part of this. So the domain local can belong to other domain local groups, so we can nest one group inside of another. This is best used to assign our permissions. So when we look at the domain local, this is how we want to assign the permissions to the end user that's inside of this domain. My global is visible everywhere. The global group can contain objects in its same domain, can also belong to a universal or domain local group. This is best used to organize my users. So a lot of times we'll put in the global group and we'll have our different users in different domains in this. My universal is visible everywhere, can contain objects from any domain, so the domain local and the global. So it can belong to any universal or domain local group. This is best used to nest my local groups, or my global groups. So what I'm doing is taking my universal and I'm going to put my global underneath this. So universal would be something such as, I don't know, United States. And then under that, I might have under that the global of my different states that I have you. And then the different companies within that would be the domain locals underneath that. So we are nesting things inside of one another to be able to identify where you are and what you are a part of. We can actually manage our different objects that are out there. They give us this ability to go in and actually do this, to take a look at some of the different things that we have. So this would be for Dwayne Anderson's properties. We have all these tabs on top. The general is going to have their first name, last name, and how we display you, what's your telephone number, email address, and if you have a web page up there. So we have the other things such as addresses, accounts, profiles, telephone, organization, remote control, how are you coming in, remote desktop services. If we're bringing you in through RDP, do we bring you into that workstation? We can be very specific about that. The Com Plus, how are we bringing you in, what sort of communications? Are you members of different groups? I love the fact they still have dial-in up there, even on the newer systems. The environment that you're in and the sessions that we might have. So as we start looking at some of the names that we have in here, this is select this object type for contacts, computers, service accounts. So we are entering the object names. These are other people that we can contact in our group. So these are some of the permissions that we can put inside of our objects that we have. So I can also assign special permissions to something like this. So I can go ahead and tell create, delete, and manage user accounts and join a computer to the domain. So this is how we're delegating things for Dwayne Anderson to do within this. We can also assign you some group policy objects. So in the group policy objects, we are defining something like the security settings that we have. So as we look off to the right-hand side, we see things such as your account policies. So passwords and account lockout policies. So we could actually go inside of that first tab on the right-hand side, click on that. It's going to open it up and it's going to show us some of the nitty-gritty. What do you want to put in there for your password policy? How many characters for the password? How long should it be? What are the character groups that we use, uppercase, lowercase, special characters, and numbers? How long is your password good for? How many attempts do we give you to log in before we kick you out? Those would be some of the things that we can put in the group policy objects. My GPOs are great. I can take these group policy objects, and as long as you are part of the group, guess what? All of these policies get pushed out to you. When I've created these account policies for the password, all of that gets pushed out to everyone in your group. So one of the things that I ran into when I was up in Buffalo, I was teaching the ethical hacking class, and I used USBs to transfer all of the tools to my students' laptops or to their workstations. The company that I was working with up in Buffalo decided to implement group policy objects for two things: the Windows firewall and for something called Windows Defender. If you have Windows Defender or the firewall turned on when I plug my disk in, my drive into your computer, it'll wipe out all my tools. That quick, it will wipe out all my tools. It's not going to ask. It's not going to say, excuse me, Eric, do you mind if we wipe out your tools? No, it simply wipes them out, does not tell you about this. So knowing this, because I had already taught there before and I wiped out every drive I had, I went into their group policy object, and it took me about 20 minutes to do this. Go in and remove all of this out of the GPO. Yes, sir? I gave myself access. I actually did it through the regedit. So you can go, as a user, you can go into regeditor. If you know what you're doing, you can actually go in there. You don't need permissions to get into that. So yeah, I can come in as an end user. I should not be telling you this because you're going to go in and start hacking systems here on base, and I'm going to get in trouble for what you do. Well, I told you that you could do this, so you're going to go. But he gave me permission. He said it in class. It's on video. Let's go back and watch this. Burn that thing. Turn it off. Oh, God, I'm in trouble now. So I went in and I took care of this. And I went, okay, now let's put this in. Look, I can transfer this. Oh, and I'm opening up the files, and I went, okay, this is good. This is working. So I've only got 4 students in class. So I go around to each system, and I'm turning off, all of this stuff, turning off the Windows Firewall. I'm turning off the Windows Defender. So I'm on my last system. I'm transferring the files, and I'm only doing it for the first third of the chapters that we're going through. We got to do 21 chapters, so I'm doing 7 chapters of transferring this over. So while the last one's transferring over, it takes about 15 minutes to do this. I went, okay, going to hit the restroom, going to grab some coffee, get myself prepped on my workstation for class. So I come walking back in with my coffee, and my drive is gone. Now, because it's ethical hacking tools, on the very back half of the USB, I have taped onto this a very bright pink piece of paper that says hacking tools, so I don't mix this up with my other USBs. And I walk in, and it's gone. And I look over, and the student who's at that workstation came in, and he has taken the disk out and put it in his laptop over to the left. What did that do immediately to all the tools on my drive? Gone. And that was the only copy I had with me because I was on a 3-week trip, so I had very little space for the things I needed. And so I said, well, I just need 1 copy of this, and I'm handling it, so none of my students are ever going to touch this. I don't have to worry about it. Don't ever say anything like that because inevitably something's going to happen. So when the student comes walking back in, I went, oh, so I see you borrowed my drive without my permission. He goes, oh, yeah, I'm just copying the tools. I went, no, you're not. He went, yeah, I just set it up to copy. I went, no, that's not what you're doing. He said, what are you talking about? I said, you have Windows running on your system. You've got the firewall, right? And he says, yep. I said, did you turn Windows Defender off? He goes, no. I said, you've just wiped out every tool. So I'm about to print out for you a list of all the tools. It's going to take you about 22 hours to download all this. And the look on his face was, you're kidding me. I went, no. No, on our systems now, we have the first 7 chapters. You've got the other 14 chapters. You're going to have to download every single tool. And he's like, well, that's not fair. I said, was it right for you to come and just take my drive and stick it in and without my permission? Because I would have told you if you turned off, you're welcome to do that had you turned off Windows Defender. She's like, oh, man. I said, fortunately for you, there's only about 14 tools we're going to use, so you're going to spend about an hour downloading for everybody else. But yeah, it does happen. It's just that quick. So you can set up. GPOs are great. You can use that group policy object to push things out to everybody that's in your environment. And you're controlling that. So it's a great way of being, because part of what we want to do as network administrators is think about, how can I best control access and push these tools out to everybody and limit what you can do, where you can go, and the things that you can do easily. And GPOs allow us to do this. So when we take a look at group policy objects, this is why we have this in there. It took me a while. I actually had to call a friend of mine to find out how I could bypass the GPO and get in and make those modifications. Many times when we think about computers and user configurations, sometimes we have scripts that'll be there for the startup or the shutdown. We think about the computer itself, we think about the software settings, we think about account policies, your local policies. How do we restrict where you can and cannot go? We think about that Windows firewall and the advanced security, so things such as my Windows Defender. We think about the software restriction policies. What are we allowing people to put on our systems? Generally, if I want to add software onto my computer system, I'm simply going to say, here it is coming in off the USB or off of the CD or the DVD. I'm going to right-click on the executable and I'm going to say, install this as administrator. And a lot of times it lets me do this without asking for any sort of permissions at the supervisor level. So very easy for me to go ahead and set this up on a computer. When we take a look at users, as you are coming in as an end user, again, we can add some information into a script as far as when you are logging in, we can implement certain things. We can redirect certain folders. We can provide software settings. We also can bring in templates. We have all sorts of different templates. We've got administrative templates. We've got security templates. All of this can come into our system. Very easy when you're using a GPO to push this stuff out to an end user. Now, this has always been a rather tough slide for my students to memorize, because one of the things that you're going to be asked on the test is, when you're managing group policies, what is the order in which we implement these? So we start off with the local GPO, which is set on the current computer. We then look at the site GPO, the domain GPO, the organizational unit GPO, and the child GPO. So I was looking at this, and I went, oh, it was actually a pretty easy way to memorize this. So I have now moved to Orange County, California. And I can't say this on video. This would just be inappropriate. But I'm just going to let your mind wander with this one. So take a look at the initials that we have. LSD in the OC. So LSD in Orange County. I'll let you put 2 and 2 together and figure that one out. So LSD OC is the order in which these occur. If you see this on the test, it's a real easy one to put together. You're laughing about that. Why? Because you went to Orange County and... never mind. LSD in the OC. So that's an easy way to remember the local GPO, the site GPO, the domain, the organizational unit, the child OU, and that's the order in which we manage these. In setting my GPO options, we have things such as our password policy. How long should it be? How many characters do we want to have in there? Are they uppercase, lowercase, special characters, and numbers? Is there an upper limit to that? How often do you need to change it? How many times do you get to reuse a password, or how many times do you have to have a different password before you can start reusing passwords again? What's the account lockout policy? Do you get your 3 attempts and then we lock you out? What's the audit policy? Who's auditing us and what are they looking at? When did we come in? When did we leave? What did I do while I was there? The event logs, where are they being stored? The user right assignment, what access are we granting our end users? What are some of the security options? All of this is inside of my GPO options when we take a look at this. So here I am in the security settings. So I'm in Windows settings, security settings, account policies, password policy. Minimum length of the password is 7 characters. Minimum password age is 1 day. Maximum password age is 42 days. So we start looking at this. Do we want to enforce history? Yes, we do. So 24 passwords remembered, which means I cannot reuse a password 24 until I go past 24. So on the 25th time I come back into this thing, oh boy, I get to use my first password again. I can't remember what my first password was. So that's one of the concerns that we always have, is how far out do we go with this? As we begin managing our user accounts, we think about a strong but manageable password. Again, 16 characters. So people always ask, what's an easy password to use? Come on, you. There we go. So one of my favorite passwords is this. It's a passphrase. Passphrases are a whole lot easier to remember than a password. So anybody heard of a musician named of Chuck Berry? Bill, you remember what songs he sang? He had one called My Ding-a-Ling. Do you remember that? What are you laughing at back there? It starts off, when I was a little bitty boy. So here we go. When I was a little bitty boy, my grandma bought me a sweet little toy. Silver bells hanging on sweet. There's 2 things I love to do in life. One is eat and one is sing. More people would rather hear me eat than sing, including myself. I have the worst voice in the world. But 15 characters, uppercase, lowercase, special characters, and numbers. Very easy to remember. However, if you went back and looked at the actual lyrics, those are not the actual lyrics. That's how I remember it. It's so funny to listen to people sing karaoke, because they'll stop looking at the words and they'll go off on their own and they sing something that they think the artist is saying. But when you take a look at this, the 15 characters are what's important, and the fact we're using uppercase, lowercase, special characters, numbers. Yes, sir? You should already know this. Elf Cisco. But speaking of that, did you know when you go out to Google, there are 30 people watching what you're doing? If you want an example of this, go out to cbsnews.com, go to 20 minutes. There is an article out there called Data Brokers. Steve Croft is the reporter. There's 3 different reports he does on this. He brings a hacker in to show you that with Google, there's 30 people watching what you're doing at all times. In Microsoft's Internet Explorer, there are over 24 people watching what you're doing. So what the hacker did is, above Google, he brings up this circle, and there's rays of sun coming out from the circle, and every one of these, he expands it out. It shows you the data broker who's capturing your information. Yes? So the idea of this would be that if I go into my Google account, which is elfcisco@gmail, if I've logged into that and then I start doing searches on Google, then they're seeing the Elf Cisco in the upper right corner. So they know that's my handle. So now they're looking for anything going through the internet that says Elf Cisco on it, and they're capturing that to see what I'm going to look at. So this is how they target my ads to me and all this other stuff. So yeah, your handle is really what they're going after when they start looking on the internet for you. So you always have to be very cautious about what you're using. So anytime I think about, how do I best obfuscate my password, using a passphrase is a whole lot easier. It's easier for people to remember that than it is a password. So, and especially because of the fact that we have so many different machines that we get on these days. So trying to remember God, I haven't gone to this account for a while. I can't remember what my password is. I can't remember what my password is for, what is that, my PayPal account? Got no clue. So I don't even use it anymore. So as we start looking at defining those policies, we always have to think about the other things like the lockout policies. How many attempts do we give you? If you've got credentials, how do we look at the credential management? We want to make sure that we disable any unneeded or unused accounts that are on our systems. We want to assign group permissions. We want to avoid any generic accounts like guest. You should have 2 accounts for the administrator, admin 1 and admin 2, right? No. You should have an administrator account, and then you should have a username account, so that when you are not doing administrative tasks, you are coming in as an end user. You should have somebody who's always looking at your log files, so there should be continuous review. So you should enable your audit logs, and there should be someone who's going to review the user settings, and when did they come in last, what did they do, would they leave, are they only accessing those things that they have permissions to do. In auditing those user accounts, ensure that the audit logs are enabled and that they are being reviewed regularly. Regularly is not once a year, not once a month, not once a week. You should be regularly reviewing them daily. Disable accounts that are no longer needed. So there should be an automatic expiration. We think about the fact that when we let someone go, when we've terminated someone, what's the first thing that should happen when you're terminated? We deactivate their account. We disable it. There's so many times when HR fails to let IT know that somebody's been let go. I'm sorry, they still have an account. They were let go 90 days ago, yet they still have an account. And it looks like it was active yesterday because somebody came in and did something. If you've been terminated, you're probably going to be a little pissed off. Are you going to come back in and do some damage against the company? Absolutely. So the very first thing that you want to do is make sure that you disable those accounts so that individual cannot come in. But you also want to go back and review the accounts, because if someone hasn't been working there for a long time, you want to make sure that account's been disabled. So we disable account, it's disabled for 1 year. At the end of a year, it automatically expires. So then it gets deleted at the end of 1 year. We think about regular review and recertification. So if we think about recertifying our systems for certification and accreditation, one of the things we always have to think about is the review process that we go through, that recertification process. Many times with user accounts, we consider a third-party scripting tool or some tools to actually audit that for us. We can use security templates. This happens to be a template that we have in Notepad. We also have templates for the group policy editor. So you can go into the Microsoft Management Console, MMC. So if you were just sitting in the lower left corner of your Windows machine, you could type in MMC. It takes you right into that Microsoft Management Console, and it gives you this ability to go in and do a few things. So you can create different templates. You can compare the configuration to the template that you have, and you can say, go ahead and apply this template to one of the things that we have. So these are some of the things that you can do with your accounts in Microsoft. We also saw a little bit on Linux there. So here are some questions for you. The first question, what order does Windows process GPOs in? What's the first one? Local. Second one? Site. Next one? Domain. Organization? And child. Gee, I don't know how you remembered that one. What is the best place to assign permissions? Domain local, yeah, you should generally assign permissions to the domain local group, then assign global groups to the domain local group. So I've got my domain local, and then I'm going to assign a global to that. When you enforce password complexity in Windows, you can't edit the precise complexity requirements. True or false? Actually, it's true. If it's enabled, it uses Windows' definition of a complex password. So if you're saying, I want complex passwords, then it's already been defined. During the discussion of user account policies, someone suggested lowering the account lockout threshold on a Windows domain. What would be the net effect of this change? Less secure and less trouble for users? If it's very low, it's hard for an attacker to guess passwords without getting locked out, but easier for forgetful or careless users to lock themselves out. So yes, it is A. When it's so important to change passwords regularly, why would you set a minimum password age? It's actually Bravo, to keep my users from bypassing history requirements. Because if I don't put in those history requirements, what's going to happen, and I get students telling me this all the time, oh, I just go in and here's my new password. I'm then going to go in and put in password 1, password 2, password 3, password 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and now I can go back, since it required 24 changes, now I can put in my regular password again. So that's one of the concerns that we always have with that history command. So in this chapter, we took a look at access control models, including the DAC, MAC, so discretionary access control, mandatory access control. We took a look at both RBACs, role-based access control, and rule-based access control. We also looked at how to set and interpret file access permissions and inheritance. We also looked at how to manage our user groups, the accounts, the organizational units in Active Directory, and how to secure systems and networks using group policy objects. In this next chapter, we're going to take a look at how to design security policies. We're going to take a look at some user training practices and how to physically secure the assets and manage some safety controls that we have. So this first module is going to talk about security policies. We're going to take a look at security policies, how to plan secure users, and personnel policies. We're going to talk about some common business contracts that are out there, how to address security concerns with third-party data access. I can tell you right now that most companies don't like the paperwork side of policies. They don't like to write policies. They don't like standards. They don't like guidelines. They don't like procedures. They don't like writing this stuff because, and I have to be honest, I didn't like it at all either because they'd always turn to us in IT and go, we need you to go write this policy. I don't write policies. This is not my gig. I don't do this. I fix computers. I build networks. I don't write this stuff. Well, we don't have anybody else to do it. So let me get this straight. You already got me working 65 hours a week, and now you want me to tag on top of this writing some policies. No. But we have to think out there. There are some frameworks that might help us out there. So we start thinking about some of the frameworks that you might have. You've got ISACA has some different frameworks for some of the classes that they teach. You've got frameworks that are coming out of NIST, has the NIST 800 series, some great frameworks in there. The ISO 27000 series, incredible different policies or different frameworks they have. Those frameworks get into different environments. When you get into the 27,199, that's for the medical field. That's for hospitals. That's for anything dealing with your HIPAA type of information. So you start looking at the frameworks that are out there. If you can find a framework that is similar or matching what your company does, then you can simply take that framework and say, what do you have? What are your recommendations of what we need in the way of policies and procedures, standards and guidelines? So we can start looking at all of these things and saying, this is going to give me a template of what I need to take a look at. Again, if I've got to write these things, where can I get templates? One of the best places to get the template is Google. But also SANS.org has some great templates that are out there for a lot of these documents that we need to write. So when we take a look first at the policy, what is a policy? If I take a look at my security policy, what is my security policy providing for me? Tells me what I can and cannot do. From whose perspective? From upper management. So this is how upper management is basically pushing out their ideas to us, is here's what you should follow while you are working here at our office. What is a standard? It's a requirement. Standards today would be something like your password must be 16 characters. That's a standard. It's a requirement. What's a guideline? Simply a recommendation. So guidelines are that you would do this, this, and this when you first come into work. Yeah, you don't have to. It is a guideline. Benchmark. It's a baseline. It's a minimum level of security that we might have in our system. Who writes procedures? You write procedures. Are you a technician? Are you writing technical procedures? Who's your audience in reading this? Other technicians. Okay. You and all the other technicians are injured. A non-technical person has to come and read your procedure. Can they first read it and understand it? And secondly, can they implement it? But you're writing it from a technical perspective. For people that are non-technical or for people that are technical? You're writing it for a technical audience. But what if a non-technical person has to be able to do this?
Depends on what level you wrote it at.
It depends on what level you wrote it at and also how much knowledge is necessary to actually implement this procedure. So you think about something like a tape backup procedure, or better yet, bringing a tape backup back in the other direction, restoring a system. So if you think about restoring a system, if you've had a tornado hit your building and it's killed everybody in IT, and you've got a salesperson sitting there with a tape and a system and going, I'm trying to read this procedure, but it's all written in IT-isms. So they might be a little confused. So that's always the concern that we have, is that your procedures are written by technical for technical. So if somebody who is non-technical shows up to try to restore a tape backup, they may not be able to have that knowledge enough to be able to do something like that. So you always got to think of who your audience is as you write these. We also think about the controls that we have in place. More than likely, that salesperson's not going to gain access into the server room to be able to do this anyway. So we've already put in controls that preclude them from ever getting into that location to be able to implement those procedures that you wrote. So they'll never get to the part where they go, I can't read this, it's too technical for me. But that does happen. Many times we have concerns about the regulatory compliance depending on the industry that we are in. So Sarbanes-Oxley is really for people who are investing money into banks and into other institutions, how they handle things. You guys are controlled a lot by the Federal Information Security Management Act, so FISMA does have some requirements that will affect you. HIPAA. So with the HIPAA standards, we're always taking a look at what can HIPAA do for you to keep your stuff secure. about 3 years ago, I had an intestinal problem, so I went down to the hospital because it doubled me over. And I got down there, so as I came into the hospital emergency room, I went to the receptionist, I gave her my driver's license and my Blue Cross Blue Shield card. So she's writing everything down. She says, have a seat, we'll be with you momentarily. 45 minutes later, they take me in the back room, and the guy kept asking me, he says, so if you had to tell me at what level the pain was, 0 being no pain, 10 being the worst pain you've ever had, he said, where would you place this? And I said, well, ran my finger through a table saw, that was an 11. This came in at about a 17. Had me doubled over. I thought somebody was just stabbing me in the stomach. He's like, oh, okay. So they put me back outside again, and then they finally get to me and they go, okay, we're going to put you in a little room back here, put the little gown on, and somebody will be by. So I get in the little gown, and I'm sitting there on the table, and somebody comes in, and somebody else, and somebody else, and somebody else, and there's now 7 people in my room with me. And the person I saw out front, not the receptionist, but they said registration. This person was playing solitaire when I walked in. How do I know this? Because her office was glass. And you could see behind her, and I'm walking by going, put the jack on the queen, put the queen on the king, put the jack on the king and the king on the queen, or the queen on the king. And they could have just had me go in there, but she comes in and she's got her little chair and she's got her little laptop. She says, so you're Eric Lefevre? I said, yes, I am. She says, okay, well, because you've got Blue Cross Blue Shield through the state of California, you have to give us your Social Security number so that we can link this up for your tax purposes. So I need your Social Security number. I'm going, there's 7 other people in this room. I'm not going to tell you what my Social Security number is. She goes, but I have to have this. So I said, let me borrow your pen. So I wrote down the first 3 numbers, and I handed back the pen. I said, there's the first 3 numbers. I gave her the last 6 digits. She went, thank you. So she continued on asking me all these questions, and as she's leaving, she says, I just would like to reiterate that your Social Security number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. She said this in front of 7 other people. Has she just violated every HIPAA requirement? Yes. Did she violate PII? Yes. Is the hospital liable for anything that happens with my Social Security number because of that? Absolutely. So, yeah, I went right back to upper management, and I went, this can't be done. This is in violation of HIPAA requirements. So when you start looking at the HIPAA requirements, not only are they talking about your health issues, but they're also talking about your personal identifiable information. They cannot share that with anybody else, either verbally or on paper. When you think about the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, I believe with that one, this is required for kids that are older than or younger than 13 years old. I think that's the cutoff, is 13 and below. Graham-Leach-Bliley, again, this is used for investments or banking, one of the two. Either the Sarbanes-Oxley is banking or Graham-Leach-Bliley. I can't remember which one. What's that?
Graham-Leach is banking.
Okay, thank you. And, of course, the payment card industry data security standard. It was funny, I had gone out to Catalina on a vacation with my family, and I couldn't get there. My brother works Monday through Thursday, has Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off, so we started the trip on Friday out in Catalina Island, and I couldn't go on Friday because I was just still working on Friday, and I flew back home on Saturday, so I didn't get out there till Sunday. So he had to go give the rental agency the credit card. So he gave him his credit card, and I'd already paid for it, so I had to come back in on Sunday and say, here's my credit card. It's already been paid for through me, but I know you have to keep this on file. I said, I just want to make sure that you take my brother's credit card information and properly destroy it. And the guy says, so you work with the PCI DSS? And I went, yes, I do. And his hand started shaking. I mean, he's like, sir, we're going to take care of this right away as soon as I can find his paperwork. I mean, this guy is scrambling, running all over the office, and by the end, his hands and arms are shaking violently. And he's like, sir, I'm going to take this in the back and shred it, and you're welcome to come with me while I shred it. So you can see it's being shredded. I'm like, sir, just relax. I'm not here to write up any violations for you. I just want to make sure that you transfer this smoothly over to my credit card and destroy anything you have on him. He's like, sir, we're doing that right now. You can hear the shredder going right now. I'm like, this was just hilarious to me. So 2 days later, I want to come back in. They don't have a wireless that's working in the house that we got. So I came in to get a hotspot. And the guy goes, oh, it's PCI DSS guy, and his hand starts shaking. I didn't have the tenacity to tell him that I just teach this stuff, that I don't really work for PCI DSS. But I was happy to see him jumping through the hoops to maintain that compliancy. So anytime they're recording any information that they have on you, they must properly dispose of that stuff. So here are some of the policy frameworks that we have. NIST, again, with that 800 series. So if you're going to be doing anything in writing standards for computer systems, NIST 800 series gives you a great understanding of some of the best practices for the federal government. The ISO 27000 series, a broad policy framework. Again, as they get into those last 3 digits under 27000, what they're going to be doing is defining different business types that are out there. COBIT is the control objective for information and relatable technologies, published by ISACA. ISACA has 2 classes that they provide. One is SISM and the other is CISA. So when we take a look at where Security Plus lies in the whole realm of other security classes, this is the entry level of security in computers. The next level up from this is CompTIA's Advanced Security Professional. As we move up, we go from, in this class, about 80 to 90% technical versus about 10 to 20% management. As we move up, we're going to increase the management. As we move up into the CASP, you're looking at probably 60-65% as being technical, and probably 30-35% being management. As you move up into CISSP, you are looking at about 20% being technical, 80% being management. As you move up into the COVID classes, the ISACA classes of CISM, which is the Certified Information Systems Manager, this is about 95% management and 10% technical. What they're looking for are things such as the key performance indicators of the equipment that you bought. So they're looking at the return on security investment. They're looking at some of the things that upper managers want to know about. The amount of money that we invested and if we're getting our return on our investment. I found ITIL to be a rather interesting class. The ITIL class is the Information Technology Infrastructure Library. Anybody take ITIL? There are quite a few different ITIL classes. ITIL is one of the most boring classes I've ever taken or ever taught. There's no way to liven up the information. I've never found a way to do that. So when we think about ITIL, ITIL really gave us a new perspective on IT. And that new perspective is as follows. IT is always looked at as the black hole of money in our office. Why? Oh, we just give money to IT and we don't get anything out of it, right? They have to buy the routers, the switches, the firewalls, the access point. We're building the infrastructure, but other departments don't see infrastructure. What do they see? Oh, they get all the money and they have all these high-paid people. No, we don't get high-paid. We're not as high-paid as a lot of the other folks. A lot of the money goes into that infrastructure and goes into our training so that we know how to set up and maintain that infrastructure. So what I loved about ITIL was their perspective on what you should do with ITIL. You should make your IT department a service department. In other words, you're charging people for IT services. Let me give you a good example of this. When I worked for academic computing at Humboldt State University, I just spent my summer working as an electrician. I spent the last 3 weeks of the summer 35 feet up in the air replacing the ballast in all these fluorescent lights you see above you. So it's one of those little scissor jacks where you're like, and the scissors open up and take you up, and you fix the light, you bring it down, you move it over to the next light and move up. My boss loved it because I would be up at the very top, 35 feet up. I'd be reaching up, and he'd turn the power back on and zap me. It's like, that's not funny. So I ended up dropping my hammer, which landed on his hard hat, and he looked at me and goes, that's not funny. And I said, hey, it's not fun being up 35 feet and having you electrocute me, okay? So I'm working for academic computing. It's the third week of classes. One of the fluorescent lights is out. I turn to my boss. Hey, boss, I spent my summer replacing the ballast. All I need is a ladder, $25, and about 15 minutes. I can go ahead and swap. You don't even have to turn the power off. He's like, that'd be great. There's only one problem. You can't touch the lights. Why can't I touch the lights? The lights are handled, all of this is handled by operations and maintenance. So we call maintenance and operations. What do? They come out, they put a ladder up that's 12 feet high. They cordon off the area with yellow tape. They do this on Wednesday. That tape is up there all day Wednesday, all day Thursday, until Friday at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the tape is down and the ladder comes down. How much did they charge me to replace a $21 ballast? Double that. Actually, $851. I'm going, what? This is providing your services. So this is what ITIL is teaching us. Take the IT department and provide it as a service department. So HR calls up and says, hey, Eric, we need those 3 new computer systems. I would turn and say, how much money do you have in your budget? You have $20,000. We can do this. We'll go ahead and get the machines you need. We'll get the software that you need. We'll set them up. We'll go ahead and implement all the software. We'll train your end users on how to get into this. We'll come out, put them into your system, but just transfer that $20,000 over to us, and we'll make those 3 systems work for you. They're like, but we could buy the 3 systems ourselves for $3,000. Yeah, but that's not how it works here. You have to come through IT. And then you turn to them and say, just be glad we're not putting in the ballast into your lights. So this is what ITIL really talks about, is the different paradigm of how we might shift the way that we are doing things in IT. We come back from break. We're going to talk about the security policies by role. So we'll see you guys back here at, let's make it 5 minutes after. Let's make it 10 minutes after. Give you a little longer break.